Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's the one. I'm here with a special guest, Mrs. Erica Cooper. She's a CCIE data center specifically. She's a VCP, which is a VMware cert, and then she also has her CCNP route switch. What's up, Erica?
Hey, what's up? How's it going? Good morning. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate that. And welcome to the Lab Everyday community. So, good morning.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Erica. I'm so excited to have you on the channel. You're such an inspiration on Twitter and just online and everything you do. And I just want to thank you again.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. It's just we all got to help each other out. It's a very small community. So, definitely, I welcome the opportunity. So, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Now, I'm so excited to talk about, just the CCIE data center, your story. Could we start with how you started in information technology?
Sure. So, let's see. I got my degree in Atlanta electrical engineering in '96, and so at that point, I started out kind of in IT a little bit. Started out on the Antonio McCarver's side, which is the voice side, working as a voice technician. And then at that point, I kind of saw that worked there for about. I worked at Lucent Technologies for about 4 years, and I saw there was like very limiting scope. Everything was kind of shifting as far as the market set, everything. So at that point, I was like, you know what? There was a guy that was in my group and he started his own company. He was like, this voiceover IP, this voiceover, just voiceover anything. And so I was looking at him, I was like, wow, that's kind of where I want to go. So I reached out to him directly and I said, hey, can you take me up under your wing? I want to be where you're at. And so he was just like, well, if you're going to go that route, then you need to start, you know, getting prepared for it. So therefore, he was just like, get your, you look at doing some certifications. That was the first I'd ever heard of certifications. I was like, certs. I thought my degree was okay. No, it's. I hate to put it like this, but it's like he was like, in order to get where you need to go, he told me very early on in my career, he was like, you have to pave your own way,
Hmm.
and that just stuck with me. It was just like, okay. And what he did was he would use certifications to build that skill set, and at that point, it was just like. In the industry, it was like, well, do you go the Microsoft route, Novell route, or Cisco? And when I saw him build his own company, he was doing Cisco. And that's what kind of, I guess, drove me to that path of Cisco. And now that's not saying that Microsoft is not anything or no, at that time Novell, but it was just like what he was doing was an interest for me.
Right.
And so from that point, he would have me do all the grunt work, LAN cable, just doing some router stuff, some route switch stuff. I couldn't turn in my config unless he actually vetted it. And then if I, kind of messed up my configuration, he'd, kind of send me back and say, okay, look at this, look at that, and make some changes. So it was kind of like he took me up under his wing. So that's why I got it. That's how I got into IT. So.
Having a mentor like that is amazing.
Yeah, but you know what? I kind of got out of my comfort zone as well because I'm really kind of shy. I don't really say, I don't go and take the initiative like, oh, let me kind of stand back and kind of look at you from afar. But my boyfriend at the time, which is now my husband, he was like, no, no, no. If you want to get an IT and go a different route, why don't you just go up and ask him, what did he do to get to where he's at? And that's what I did, and that's what kind of helped me out a lot. So
That- that's priceless, honestly. Having that opportunity to,
yeah.
it sounds like you touched a lot of technology or early on in your career. You had a lot of exposure.
I did. I did. But here's the thing. I worked with him, and I still keep in contact with him, pretty regularly since we left Georgia. But um, you know, it's about building relationships, key relationships, and then saying, let me be humble and just like let me, if you got something that I can work on, I'll do that for you. And even if you're not paying me, I'm still willing to soak up that knowledge. So yeah, that was pretty positive for me. It helped me out a lot. So
That's super humble to have and super aware to know that although I'm not getting paid, this is going to be way more valuable than making a few dollars now.
yeah, so that was the thing because the guy was like, if you want to succeed, then you're going to actually have to be able to do the, I guess the grunt work, but then also take in that knowledge and then expand on it. He was just like, don't stop here, maybe look at some other certs. And at that point in time, the Cisco had just come out with their CCNP track. And so that's when I started down that, really arduous task of, like, okay, let me complete all five of these certs to take all the five of the tests. So yeah, it was, he was very influential on my career. So at that, him and my husband. So,
That
you know,
that's that's awesome. You,
teamwork makes the dream work, right?
I'm about that all day, especially in my family, and I see your family is the same way. So that's what's up. Now you mentioned something that he said, and I want to get to the next questions, but I do want to touch this topic or this point that he made. He said, in order to get to where you want to go, you got to pave your own way. That's
Right,
powerful to me.
right, right. Yeah, so that's a very powerful statement because here's the thing. What I used to see at Lucent was a lot of people would, well, if the company's not paying for it, then I'm not going to do it. And I just did something different. I was just like, well, why wait on somebody? Why not create your own? And when I saw him leave the company and start his own, I was like, wow, that was for me was inspirational. And that was where I wanted to kind of get to my own independent status. Now, yeah, I still work for a company, but if I want to learn a different technology, why wait on somebody? Why
Right.
not just, there's so much tools out there. Like the GNS3 or anything that you could, or YouTube videos that you can kind of start researching and doing your own thing and carving your own path. So that just stuck with me. So
I totally agree. And
yeah.
salute to that gentleman for helping you get here today. Salute to him and your husband, and to you for putting in the work. So
I appreciate it. Thank you.
no problem, no problem. Okay, so you started on the Cisco track. Now you said you went to the CCNP. At what? How long did you stick with Cisco, and how did you get to become a CCIE?
That's a great question. So I've always been within the Cisco arena, and then kind of picking up a lot of the Microsoft, just the not necessarily doing like server administration, but just Cisco and just troubleshooting and whether or not how to know how to troubleshoot like server issues and stuff like that or application issues. Um, what brought me down the path of actually trying to do finishing up my CCNA and doing my CCNA MP was that I was seeing a lot of people in the industry, advancing their career, and so that point it was like, okay, in order to get to the next step for me, it just made sense to actually go from CCNA to MP and build that foundation. If you can actually, get the foundation under, really solid, then at that point you can branch out because route switch is like the if you know how to about your VLANs, your troubleshooting, your routing protocols and troubleshooting
Right,
that's solid and you can take that anywhere. So, and from that point it just made sense. For, once I finished up the MP, I sat around and I said, okay, well let me try to get my CCIE in routing and switching. I did take, three attempts at the routing and switching track, wasn't successful with it. One thing that my friend also told me was that invest in yourself. So I invested in, route switch, equipment at home off of eBay and, borrowing some gear that somebody, I would kind of lease their gear and say, hey, can I borrow this? And then it just kind of, you can have it, after a couple months, you can have it. But, um, yeah, just I got my equipment, started setting up my lab at home, and then from that point, I did my CCIE first and second attempt, and then the third attempt, I was just like, just wasn't successful, but I didn't quit. That was the thing. I kind of got upset about. It. I was like, yeah, it sucks, but I still kept with it, And my husband encouraged me to get back on the track with doing my data center track. So, uh,
So it seems that that was a wise pivot.
yeah, it was because here's the thing: getting the routing and switching, like I said, it's very powerful certification at CCIE. But when the industry, the tech industry, when I'm sorry, the certification industry, when they changed the format from version I think 4 to 5, that's when I just kind of like, oh, I got to buy more equipment, buy this. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I just sat for a minute and kind of was still. And my husband was like, no, 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 we started this journey. Let's finish this up.
Right.
And he was like, look at some other track. You got to, do security, do data center. It doesn't matter. They had just came out with the data center. I did some research on it, and I realized I was like, well, I don't necessarily need to do the entire CCNA data center, MP data center. Let's just go with CCIE. So I passed the written, and then I started getting the INE, the Internet Networking Expert boot camp videos, and I went through all of that. They had the rack time available, and I realized that the foundation that I had from the routing and switching was so crucial for the data center track.
Hmm.
And so at that point, I didn't have to start over. It was like, okay, I can pick this stuff up really quick. And so I took that exam, and like I said, it took me 4 times to get my CCIE, but I got it. Yeah,
Man, that's so inspiring because sometimes you face a battle
yeah,
and you feel defeated,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
only preparing you for something greater.
yeah, yeah.
And s- I just know I just would like to just see you once you got your CCIE because I know that feeling was like one of the greatest ever.
I'd never forget it. Wow. When I found out I passed, because when I took the exam, well, first and foremost, I went down to RTP, North Carolina, 4 days before the exam, and I had rented out the rack time at INE, and I was like, okay, I don't want to shut my phone off. No, my husband, I said, look, if it's critical, call the hotel phone, but my cell phone's off, and everything else. And so I was labbing all the way up until the night before. And then when I took the exam, I'll never forget. I walked in there, and the gentleman that was a proctor for the lab, he was like, "You guys, you'll have what they call candidate brain, where you're not paying attention." He was like, "I just need you guys to kind of pay attention to what I'm saying, take your exam, and then good luck, and then go from there." So I took the exam. I finished up with an hour to kind of review everything, and then at that point, I just said, "Okay, I'm done." Shook the proctor's hand, and I left. And I called my husband. I said, "Oh, I don't know if I got it. I'm nervous. Did I do this? Oh no, I forgot. I didn't. It was just like I was a nervous wreck." And my husband's like, "You need to just calm down and just relax." He said, "I think you did good. If you didn't, then we just do it again and keep going." And I never forget. I was talking to my father at that time, and I said, "Oh, look, hold on, I got an email from Cisco." I said, "I'll call you right back." And he's like, "Okay." And I just screamed. I just like, ah, and I was like, oh, let me just be quiet. And then I called my husband, and I just burst into tears at that point. I was like, I got it. I'm a CCIE. So yeah.
Man, I got like chills.
And I call, and then I sent out my text like pass CCIE, it's just like, and I sent the screenshot to my manager. And it was a Sunday because the data center track at that time was so everybody was taking exams. And he called me Sunday night. He was watching I think because he was from Green Bay. He was watching the Packers versus the Vikings. And he called me in the middle of the game. He was like, "Did you pass?" And yeah, because I sent him a screenshot, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm a CCIE, man." I was like, "Yeah, I got it."
That is
So
so cool.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm happy for you, and that story right there is. I hope people feel what I feel right now. Is It's inspiring. Okay, now I have so many questions. I do
Sure.
want to talk about the data center track, but you mentioned while we're still kind of about on the lab, the INE preparing for the CCIE. Now you said you built the home lab, but
Right.
you also did the INE tokens. Can you kind of talk about the differences and how it prepared you?
Sure. So the INE tokens, okay, so for example, I built my route switch lab. So I had all the, and I built the route switch lab off the workbooks from INE. I've always
Okay.
used Internet Working Expert. So
Okay.
I bought the, what is it, the 12 routers, the backbone routers. I had some 2501s, then I had the four switches. So I built my lab to do their labs in order to prepare for the routing and switching track. Well, when I shifted gears and Cisco changed from the technology from was it version 4 of the CCI route switch lab to version 5 where it's currently at, I didn't want to go out and buy any more equipment. I was like, my husband's gonna kill me and bringing all this equipment in. It's like, look, what are we doing?
Right.
So I said, okay, I got in when he had started encouraging me to do my data center track. I had to get the equipment because that's the only way I'm going to get experience. At the time, I had my a valid CCO account, and I went to my account manager that was supporting the customer I was working with, and I asked him, could I get the UCS, the Unified Communication Server UCS simulator? I
Right.
used that for my UCS experience, and then I also my next plan of action was to use the INE rack tokens, which is you just build up a certain amount of tokens, you pay for it, and then you have the rack lab itself, and they
Mm.
have pretty much the entire the Nexus 5Ks, the 7Ks, the 2Ks that you could set up within that appear as effects cards off the 5K. So it was just like they had the entire equipment that I needed, and I just ran through their labs. And that was very successful for me because it gave me that hands-on experience. And when I didn't have rack tokens and use that, I just used my UCS simulator and then did a lot of reading and going through their videos and their lab workbooks. So that helped out a lot too.
Okay.
So
Okay. Now we that I do want to check out INE for myself because I never use the tokens. I've
right.
always been a lab, but and GNS3 seems to give me everything I need to lab for like work and just for experience. But I do when I attempt my CCIE, I do plan to go probably through INE because
Okay.
that's what
Okay.
everybody says. But I hear it can be expensive.
Yeah, that's true. But here's the thing. That is very true. It is expensive. But one thing I can say is if you're going to go after anything, you have to invest in yourself. And I'm not saying that to start preaching to anybody, but if you're not going to take the time out to invest in yourself, then you can only, I mean, how are you going to be able to get to where you need to? Now, yeah, you can definitely build your own labs within GNS3, and I think they've got the other free product out there, the EVE, the
Right.
Eve of
Even G.
yeah, NG.
Right.
You can definitely build your labs. The only reason why I went through that is because Eve was not out. GNS3 was too, at that time, memory intensive and CPU processor intensive
Right.
on the computer. I remember I had to open up 4 routers and I couldn't even open up a text file. And I was like, oh, this
Mm.
is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But they've improved with technology. So
Right.
at that time, I invested in myself with the INE rack, because there were so many successful engineers that were coming out and getting their, CCIE route switch or, excuse me, service provider or security track. It was just, they had just a really good product and plan that you could just kind of follow and take it and be successful with it. So why not, follow that track of where people had already gotten there, been successful with it. So yeah,
I agree. The pathway was already laid, and you got to
yeah,
invest in yourself. Got to.
yeah,
Got to.
right.
Yes. So, okay. Now, the data center track. What is it specifically? What does it cover? What does it cover? And
Well, that's a good question. So the data center track is more. Think of like the Nexus 7000s, the 9000s, the 5000s. They are more geared towards like how you're going to automate your network. So you've got like your route switch, your campus legacy 6500s. Well, the next step, if you want to actually take it into like any type of data center opportunity, data center projects, like you can set up your own virtual device context. Depending upon what type of soup cards you get, supervisor cards that you get, you can do either, your standard 4 VDCs or your 8 VDCs, and you can set up. It's almost like your own virtualized data center, and you
Right.
can set that up within the Nexus, platform. That's more of it gives you a lot more flexibility. You can go into like if you wanted to take it into ACI, which is the software defined networking, you can go into that environment a lot cleaner. It gives you more scalability, more flexibility within your enterprise. I see a lot of customers now replacing their legacy 6500s with, like the Nexus 9Ks. And then you don't
Right.
necessarily have to go into ACI, but you have a switch that is capable of doing either NXOS, which is the Nexus OS, or you can go into the ACI fabric and stuff like that.
So that's basically fabric switching.
Yeah, they have initially when it came out, they have what they call fabric path, fabric switching. Yeah, but now it's more of a spine leaf architecture. With spine leaf architecture, you're looking at everything one hop away. So you've got servers that are attached to leafs, and then from the leaf you're attached to the spines, and then from spines you go out. Well, from the leafs you go out to like either your border routers or like your campus firewalls and stuff like that. But you have everything is one single hop away. So you've got leaf to spine, server to leaf to spine. Everything's just one hop away. It's based off that CLOS fabric, CLOS technology.
Oh,
Everything's one hop away.
you know what I find interesting about this, and in the positions I've been in before, I never really had to deal with the what is it, the 5Ks, 2Ks, 7Ks, and all that stuff.
Right.
But one of the things I'm finding is that as a network engineer, they want you to know the data center track. They
Hmm.
want you to know the security track
Yeah.
and route switch. Like all of that interacts when you come with your infrastructure. So
That as well as Linux commands. What I'm starting to find out now is the more you're more intimately knowledgeable on not only just the server aspect, how do your servers and applications function within a routing and switching or your enterprise environment, but
right,
also, you may have to jump on a Linux box and help the server guys out. So you're gonna have to kind of like get out of this singular focus of only knowing routing and switching or only knowing security. You're gonna have to kind of branch out, and that's what I've seen the change within the industry. Like when I first started, it was just like, hey, if you were a Cisco engineer, you had the keys to the kingdom.
right,
Now it's like, well, yeah, you got a little bit of small little, little set of kingdom, but we also need you to know, routing and switching, server administration to help the server guys out, because that's, 9 times out of 10 they're going to say that's not my problem. It's, the network. No,
right.
it's not a problem issue. We just need to help you out with the application, or
Yeah,
help you out with something with the firewalls and stuff like that. So yeah,
right.
you wear multiple hats when you're a network engineer.
Right. And the developers want full access. They want to be able to do everything.
Absolutely. But you think about it. You think about it. It's like if what Amazon and what they offer right now, you can buy something off the internet and have it at your house the next day.
True.
Things have changed right now. I mean, like
Right.
when we first started, it was, building out firewalls took you almost 3-4 months.
Right.
And you got the your cabling, install the gear, configure it, test it out. All
Right.
of that took time. Now it's like, no, I want something now. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, you got to kind of be flexible and change with the times a little bit. So, and that's where a lot of people are starting to get into the scripting, the Python scripting, and everything else. So it's pretty, pretty unique and dynamic times right now. So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. Are you doing any Ansible or Python at the moment?
Yes, I'm not proud of that, but yeah. I'm sorry, I'm kind of like I'm learning on my own, but yeah, I got the Python book, but yeah, I've started kind of dabbling a little bit into JSON, the Java, scripting. So,
Right,
but I do that. They have what is called an ACI simulator out there, and so I've been kind of dabbling a little bit with that because if you can set up and configure, let's say, 100 leafs,
right,
and like let's say in half hour, I'd rather do that versus punching keys, pounding keys all day, hitting, just doing all this configuring.
right,
It's you can automate that, and that's so much easier. So yeah, I'm starting to get into that a lot. They've got something out there on with the GitLab and GitHub
right.
that I'm gonna probably start putting my scripts out there and seeing. I've been kind of dabbling a little bit with it, but not too much, not on a on a daily basis, but starting to get into it. What about yourself? Are you
Yeah,
doing that as well?
yeah. Actually, my lead, he's that guy scripts. He's he's a beast, and so working with him is really helped me to understand a lot more of what I'm actually doing and why it's beneficial, especially like my environment. We have over 3,000 sites,
Okay.
and so if 1,000 routers got an issue, we can't touch 1,000 routers.
No.
So you're going to use SolarWinds NCM to push something out, and he even scripts through like SNMP or something crazy. Like he's really good at what he does, Python, everything. So working with him, I'm learning, and yeah, I want to be good at that. So
That's great. I mean, if you can, kind of be a sponge with him, that's great because that's what's going to happen. That's what it's going to take you to the next level. I mean, because like if you come in with your networking and background and you know how to script, via SNMP or Cisco Prime or SolarWinds, that's perfect. That's great. I mean, that'll put you in a very rare category because a lot of engineers they either have to learn and pick that up now, but you're starting to pick that up right now. So that's great. So
thank you.
yeah, I definitely would encourage you to continue doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I have a question, and this is
Sure.
for that we've been kind of talking to those mid-level, high-level people. Now, for those that are looking to get in IT, we mentioned that you kind of got to know a little bit of security, um, the route switch, the data center, the Python, everything. Well, how do you recommend someone start, or what should they focus on?
Well, okay, that's a great question. So, like for example, for me, I started out in routing and switching. I knew I did not want to go back to voice. So if you're going to start out with something, I would get like a kind of get narrow scope focus on, like if you're going to do a path, if you're going to do security, then maybe start on like your CCNA. If you want to go down the Cisco path, if you want to go kind of vendor neutral, then maybe look at different certifications that will get you to that point. But at some point, you definitely still would need to have some type of hands-on, whether it's with Juniper firewalls, Palo Alto, Cisco firewalls. If you don't know like the specific details about Cisco, at least have some intimate knowledge about how it functions within the network.
Right,
Why, how do you put in your clustering, commands, or if you're doing an active standby or active firewall, kind of have an intimate knowledge of it. You can pick that up via the white papers, the Cisco live presentations. Even it's, some people, do some YouTube videos for configuration, how they set up everything. So I would kind of start out very narrow. And then if you want to branch out to like vendor specific products, then you can do that, but kind of get the foundation for it first. So,
yeah. And the more you branch out, the more questions you'll have. Like
yes.
one of the questions I ran into is like, where do you place the firewall?
It depends. That's a great question, but are you trying to, in a ACI environment, are you trying to, put that, closer towards your applications, or are you putting it outside of your network? So it just kind of depends.
Right.
So
So you're going to have multiple firewalls
yeah,
depending on how your environment is set up, how large, and what you're trying to accomplish. But until you actually dive into that domain, you may think the firewall is at the edge of your network, but it's really not, or the gateway of your network, and
correct,
that's not
correct.
always the case.
No, no, it's not. And then some days you might have circuits that come in, and do you want your firewall to actively monitor traffic? Because if so, your configs better be solid because you may stop traffic that needs to go through.
Exactly.
I've seen people set up an inline firewall on their border router, so it's like basically hanging off of your border router, and they do all these configs, and next thing you know, well, I can't get to this site, or I can't. Well, yeah, it's a firewall. Let's look at the configs here. Do you want it inline or do you want it passive or just so you really have to look at it from a design perspective.
So for the data center track,
Hmm.
do you have to understand security as far as because a lot of times when you get into that server environment, there will be a firewall and you will have to open ports and close ports for applications. So is that something you had to learn?
Absolutely. So within the data center track, you'll have to understand, like for example, how the traffic flows inbound, outbound, where if it's going to be your servers within that environment. Do they have to traverse a firewall? If so, then we got to get the correct ports. Well, is that firewall correctly positioned in in the solution? If so, that's fine, but we need to kind of look at the firewall rules. Yeah, you'll have to get into that a lot more detailed as far as where to position it, understand the traffic flows, and then do you really need to create like a either whitelist or blacklist? A whitelist is kind of more granular, and blacklist is kind of like, okay, well, I need source destination, and then that's it. So
Right.
and then the port available port. So yeah.
Okay. Man, Erica, I could ask you so many questions. I'm so
Go
glad
for
you're
it, man.
here.
Go for it, man. I love it. I love it.
So, there's a large group of the community that is in IT for the money. You know how that goes. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
the question I like to ask is, what was your money move in your career?
Wow, that's a great question. I guess for my money move, for me personally, was when I got my. I wouldn't even say it was a CCIE, because CCIE, yeah, you can walk in and say, "Look, I want this certain amount of money," but for me, my big money move was my CCNP,
Right,
because it differentiated me from the CCNAs and everybody else that did not have that cert. That as well as my degrees, and it's how you position yourself and how you present yourself in the interview, because you can go in there and know all this technical information, but if you don't come across as knowledgeable and being able to kind of come off as being like a robot, sounding like, oh yeah, I can do show IP, BGP, blah blah blah. Who cares? I mean, it's more of a it's the I wouldn't say it's more of how you present your information,
right,
how you present who you are as an engineer.
right,
Are you just an engineer that only pounds keys all day? Well, that's great. That's okay. But look at the bigger picture. Can
right,
you go out and design something? Can you look at something, and troubleshoot it and make recommendations, for, how you're going to actually do this a little bit better? So
right.
that was my money move. And that's one thing that my mentor taught me. It was like, don't get into just pounding keys all day. Because
Mhm.
be an engineer that you can, and when I say pounding keys, meaning like a technician. You don't want to be well, I'm not saying if you want to be a technician, be a technician.
Right,
But, if you want to advance yourself, you're gonna have to look at the whole picture. And
right,
that also incorporates looking at it from a sales perspective. How is sales presenting your information to the customer? How are you presenting yourself? Are you actually, presenting a well-rounded engineer? So for me,
right.
that was key. That was my money move. And then when I got my CCIE, it was just like,
Icing
okay,
on the cake.
yeah, icing on the cake. But my big money move for me was my MP and my degrees, because it was kind of like that differentiating factor for me.
Yeah, mine too. But one of the things I do want to stress is that getting the CCNP, it sounds like you had experience to back that CCNP.
Yes, yes, I did. Yeah, I did. I mean, you cannot. Goodness, I see so many people out there like, yeah, I got my CCNA and it only took me 30 days. Well, okay, that's fine.
Right.
But if you run into an engineer that it will call you out on it, you're going to embarrass yourself. And
Facts.
you're going to embarrass yourself as well as the other NAs and MPs and IEs that are out there that don't have that knowledge. So, I encourage everybody, if you're going to put that on your resume and you went a different route, you better be able to back it up because I've seen interviews and I've conducted interviews where you know I can put you on the keyboard and that's all great, but tell me about how that technology works. And
Right.
you really need to understand it. You
Yeah.
definitely need to understand it. So
Thanks, Erica. I'm glad you said that because
let me tell you something. I conducted an interview about 6 years back that where this gentleman had his NA. He had like almost every CCNA possible
Mm,
that was from Cisco.
right.
We're talking about the voice, security, route switch, service provider, the service provider ops. And I said, okay, well, this is great. So tell me about, how BGP works within an enterprise environment. And he started spitting out all these commands. I was like, yeah, but you didn't really answer the question.
Mm,
So it was almost like he was prepared from a config standpoint, but he didn't really know the technology, didn't understand it. So when we put him in front of like a scenario based environment during the interview, he struggled. I mean, he really struggled, and that's something that if you're gonna just like do something light and quick, you better know it because a good experienced interviewer will be able to kind of pick you apart. So.
yeah. Yeah. That kind of goes in line with what you were saying as far as being able to make recommendations.
Mhm,
Um, One of the things I found in labbing is that you can go through a lab guide, you can follow somebody online and go through their lab,
mhm.
but there's more than one way to come to that solution.
Correct.
And
Correct.
and so what I found is to try different solutions and see what happens and Wireshark it and break it down to have a clear understanding. What are your
Yes.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great that's a great philosophy for what you need to do because like when I was doing my data center track, INE had their way of doing OTV, which is the overlay transport between.
Okay.
It's basically extending your layer two DCI, between the two data centers or multiple data centers. Your layer two VLANs and everything else. You can either do OTV or you can progress into let's say Lisp or BGP, EVPN and stuff like that. You can progress into different technologies, but specifically what I was doing with INE was the OTV, and so I was like, yeah, that's great. And what I did was I also went to Cisco and said, well, how are you guys setting this up?
Right.
What's the difference between what INE does and what you guys are doing? And I looked at their white papers and I said, okay, let me start kind of like you're saying, there's so many different ways to configure something that you really need to know the intimate. Because so if you get thrown something kind of left out of left field someplace, another curveball, you got it because you've done your research and say, okay, you guys do it this particular way, no problem. But I also know these other four ways of configuring it, and let me present that as well. And that
Right.
to me differentiates you from going from a pound keys technician to a engineer, architect, consultant type of environment. So it's how you present yourself and
Right.
whether or not you go that extra mile. So
I agree. I agree. Erica, this has been a great interview. I,
I appreciate it. Thank you. I
yeah,
really enjoyed it.
I thank you. So, is there anything? Do you have any advice for anyone that's entering IT in 2018?
I would find yourself a really good mentor, and then see what your mentor can help you out with, and then also if you're going to go into something, let's say any type of technology, any type of specific uh, specific field, find out the fundamentals of it first, and
Right.
then once you get that down packed, you can kind of change the rules at that point. But once you got a solid foundation, you're good to go. I think that's the best way. And then, if you've got people that like this lab everyday community, if you got questions, put it out there. I'm pretty sure if somebody hasn't been able to see it the same way that they, the questions coming in, they can probably help you with getting to a solution or an answer.
Right.
And then that way everybody learns. So it's a good community. So
Yes.
I definitely think that if you can kind of find yourself a mentor, get the fundamentals and build yourself a solid foundation, and then help out where you can, give back to the community. So
Gotta give back. Gotta give back.
absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Erica. So we're gonna have Erica on live.
All right,
We're gonna get that date in place, and I'm gonna let everybody know because I can ask questions all day, but I really want to get the questions that you have answered. And Erica is just a wealth of knowledge, experience, and she's just
appreciate it.
great. This has been fun.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you actually gave me some information and some knowledge, that I can apply to my life. So I do thank you for coming on, Erica.
My pleasure. All
Okay.
right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Take care.
Yeah.